In a time where racial injustice is all around us, this moment feels different. The Black Lives Matter movement is expanding its roots as allies across the nation march alongside Black men and women demanding justice, fighting against police brutality, calling out racism and systemic racism, and seeking change at the policy level. Everyone has a role to play in this movement, and today I have a conversation with a friend and colleague of mine, Courtney Tito, who is an attorney and member of McDonald Hopkins and practices in their health law group. Courtney is a wife to Frank Tito and a mom to two sons, one black and the other Hispanic. In this conversation, we discuss her role as a mother raising interracial children and as an ally to this movement.
Well, I just want to thank you for agreeing to have this candid conversation with me today because, we've been seeing a lot of race issues, racial injustice in the media. We've lost a lot of lives recently. And the Black Lives Matter movement is not new, but this moment kind of feels different. And I kind of welcome your perspective as an ally to the movement and as a mom of two sons of color, one who's Hispanic, one who's Black. And so I would love to kind of hear your personal standpoint and what your perspective is on everything that's going on with law enforcement and, how you compare like your life versus what you see every day, the things that are happening to Black and brown people today.
I've been blessed with being able to talk to you very candidly, I think, in the office at work, and you've always been very kind to me through all my fumbling with that. But I think, as you know, I've tried really hard to keep my boys sequestered from it. My kids are young, 5 and 9. The youngest is half Haitian, half African American, we presume. We know he's half Haitian because I've met his mom. We can only know because of his dad, but he looks Black. And then Antonio is actually half African American. Again, we don't know because we don't know what his dad is, and half Puerto Rican. So the Hispanic is there, but he can look Black. He can, pass for a kid with a great tan, in the summer, quite honestly. So he won't struggle the way that Hunter will. So I haven't really let them see a lot of what's going on right now. Ever since we've had Hunter since he was a newborn, and ever since he was tiny, we've had people stop and stare, just stare at us and all that. So that idea has been there. And I've had the conversations with Hunter about police and what to do. And Hunter, I don't know where he gets it from, but he'll, every once in a while, it's happened probably about once or twice a year since we've had him, say, well, police are the bad guys. Police are bad.
Wow.
He's 5.
Really?
And Frank's my husband. You're an ex-cop. And so there's a part of me that's like, you're right, I want you to be afraid. And then there's the other part of me that's like, no, that's not what you're supposed to be. You're supposed to be able to go to the cops.
Right, because in your experience, they're supposed to protect and serve, and you probably haven't had a negative experience with, and Frank is an ex-officer, like you said, so.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the most negative experiences I've never gotten off from a speeding ticket in my life. Every other woman I know can get off from a speeding ticket, but not
I've gotten them too, so don't even, okay?
That's not on point, I get that. I'm just trying to be funny. But no, I haven't had any negative impacts from the police. And I don't have to worry about it. But I can tell you how many times I have thought through situations of having to, literally, I walk through this in my head. How long would it take me to stand in front of my son if that cop gets upset? And he's 5. And I'm thinking,
the fact that he already knows, and you try to shelter him from that, but he knows that it's not the same.
It's kids at school. It's, we don't let our kids watch TV, so he's not getting it at home. And I try to talk to him about it and ask it, and he just doesn't really understand why he thinks that, but he does.
So well, when you have the conversations, what do you say? What do your conversations sound like, if you don't mind sharing?
No, I mean,
he's little, so it's not going to be a super sophisticated conversation. But
there was a really great video that has gotten new traction. It came out maybe 2 or 3 years ago about parents sitting down, even in the white room, the parents and the kids talking about Black parents and their kids talking about what to do with cops, and that
I've seen that. Yeah,
made me burst into tears. And, you know, I've tried to have a lot of those, okay, what do you do when the police come? And like, how do you, you know, you keep your hands where you can see them. You say yes or no, sir. You look them in the eye. You know, some of those things where you just stay calm and you try and I mean, I can't say you diffuse the situation, but you just listen to what they say and you pay attention. And I think I stopped having some of those conversations because then Hunter started freaking out in the car about if I was speeding. Mommy, you have to slow down because if the police pull you over. So he's getting something in it. And he was terrified of the ticket.
Did you see that video with the little girl? There was a white female officer walking towards her, and she asked the officer, like, "Are you gonna hurt me?" And starts breaking down and hyperventilating. And the officer, you know, officer wants to comfort her and say, "No, I'm here to protect you." But this little girl is literally shaking and crying, and my heart, literally, I was like, "This is not okay." And it's the same. Your son hasn't had that a negative experience yet, but already kind of having similar worries, which is scary.
No, because honestly, unless Frank has had a speeding ticket, which I don't know about, Hunter's never interacted with the cops other than at like the community events. Like Delray has a lot of great community events. So we'll go to the fire station and, you know, they'll have the events for the kids and then the cops will put on a motorcycle show or things like that. So those are his real life experience with cops. So it doesn't.
Which are supposed to be happy moments.
Right. So it doesn't match with his fear. So it's really hard. And when I try to have these conversations with him, he's not quite savvy enough, I don't think, to understand why he feels this way or what he thinks. And he could quite honestly just be parroting something that a kid in his class has said, and he doesn't really understand why. So, you know, it's terrifying.
I know you said that you try to not have the conversations frequently, and they're young, so there shouldn't be a need to. I don't know if you saw that video in Wellington that was recently floating around as well. Did you see that? And when you see stuff like that, because I think it's easy to see it on TV and be like, okay, I can shelter for a little bit longer. But when you see it locally, it's in our community, it's kind of like a wake-up call, because we all think that we can protect ourselves and our kids and all that kind of stuff, but sometimes it hits close to home. No child should be walking in their own neighborhood and be told, "You don't belong here. What are you doing here? Prove to me that you live here," and just assume that they're teenage girls.
The one thing that I took away from that was the poise that those girls showed and how beautifully they handled it at such a young age.
Mm-hmm.
If it had been me, I would have been terrified. I would have answered all of his questions, which is not a safe thing for a young girl or a young boy to say to an adult, but I would have been terrified. And so the thought that came through my mind was, how do I teach my boys to handle situations like that with poise and grace? Because we all know he's the a-hole in the situation, but it's just even more underscored by how well they handled it. Yeah, they were annoyed, as they had every right to be, but they were not they were not flippant. They were like, why, just making him look like an a-hole. Mm-hmm. So I'm not cursing because I don't know the audience for this. I normally curse like a sailor, but and I also was trying to think about what my reaction would be as a parent. We only saw a couple seconds of the grandfather coming out, but again, those few seconds, he handled it very well, I thought. And I would not handle it well. I go into that, sort of.
You get angry. How dare you? Who are,
Yeah. So, and you have to set examples for kids. And I hate that I have to think about this. I hate that I have to be prepared for this.
Yeah.
But honestly, I'm the only one in my family who's really not experienced it, right? Because Frank is from New Zealand. He's Indigenous from New Zealand, so he's dealt with it. Both boys will deal with it growing up. So I'm really the one that has to be the good example and to learn and to take the effort, because I'm the only one it's not going to impact if it doesn't impact me through them.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because I wanted to ask you, and it's whatever you're comfortable sharing, but right now is the time to have those uncomfortable conversations. And I wanted to know, in your circle, family, friends, Have you been having those conversations? What have they been like?
I'd say yes and no. I think I've been sort of testing out my ability to handle this on my acquaintances on Facebook. So somebody posted recently, nobody in the media is posting this, but George Floyd, blah, 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 and has passed. And my response to that was quick and angry. Who cares? Police are not judge, jury, and executioner. What does this have to do with the fact that he was murdered?
Yeah, nothing.
Right. And so that was honestly because I tried not to post political on Facebook. I, mostly we use it to keep in touch with Frank's family who's overseas, but it's been too much for me lately. And so that's sort of how I've been trying it. I have also, quite honestly, unfollowed a lot of my family members. There have been some very disturbing comments that my close family, and I'm not going to call them out on this, but have posted, and I haven't unfriended them, but I have certainly unfollowed them because I was getting too upset.
Okay, yeah.
I do have some of the conversations with like my dad and my stepmom, and I think they're more, okay, we'll just let her think that way and believe what she needs to, because how can we say no because she's got Hunter, right?
Right.
As opposed to actually confronting where their biases might be.
Right.
In the past,
it's like a little silo. We create a space for her to like have that experience, but we're still over here.
Yeah.
So you probably feel isolated in the one context.
I don't have any immediate family outside of like my little family that believes the way that I do. I have extended family that does, and I have extended family that's way on the outside. I've had conversations in the past with my sister about being colorblind and things like that, and she's very in favor of that, and I explored it for a while, but it never felt right to me. But I could never articulate it, and I probably couldn't do a good job articulating it now, but I at least remember having those conversations with her, but that was a long time ago.
Right. There's, on that note, I think I've had, classes on social justice and race and inequities growing up, and I think that is something that comes up in the narrative. Oh, do you see color or do you not see color? We're all one human race, and I think at first when you hear that, it feels safe. Like, no, I don't see color. Like, we're all human. But then when you really explore, you can't really separate me from my color. You can't separate my experience because they've created this racial construct. So by doing that, you're separating me from my identity and history and all of that. So it sounds like it's a good thing at first, but when you really identify and explore what that is, it kind of takes away meaning from the entire person.
Right, and I think that's exactly it, because I was lucky enough. I grew up in we didn't have a lot of money, so I didn't grow up in a great neighborhood. But my mom came from a family that at one point had money, so travel was always a big thing. And when I got to law school, I traveled. I did international travel. And I think as Americans, people who've lived here and who've never left the country, they can't identify that there are other cultures or that there are the richness of other cultures. And I think because I was exposed to that at a young age, I think that's why in the back of my head, it didn't feel right. And don't laugh at me for what I'm about to say. This is not the stereotypical.
I love how you say don't laugh. I'm probably gonna laugh. Okay.
Well, this is not the stereotypical my best friend was black story. It's not. So in high school, my best friend was black. But because I was not super happy in my home at the time, I spent a ton of time with her family. And their culture was different. I didn't realize at the time. I didn't think of it as culture. But it was such a loving, bonding, everything was family, all family. And we're talking not just her and her brother and her parents. It was extended family.
Extended family, yeah. As a Caribbean, I know exactly what that is. Right.
And I love that. And not that I don't have extended family that I love. We're just we don't all live in the same place. So I didn't see them. And to me, it was something that was cultural, even though I didn't identify it as that. And then getting to travel and living abroad, Americans
just open your eyes.
Are so narrow-minded, and I think that is one of the failings of being American, is we don't leave the country and see how, for as many faults as we have, how much we do have, and how to respect that we are who we are today because we were a melting pot.
Yeah. I want to touch on a few things. You put me on to Rachel Cargill, and I appreciate that because I love her.
Yeah.
And in this space right now, we're thinking about, this is a movement, not a moment, right? And we want to make change, and we have to dissect the way that we think, and there has to be a cultural shift, at least in my opinion, as well as policy changes, right? So on the cultural side, I wanted to kind of put two Rachel Cargill statements or posts that she just did, and I wanted to dissect them with you or just hear your perspective, if that's cool.
Yeah.
Okay. The first one, and she calls them Sunday school lessons from my gatherings and reading. And I love it because I also feel like I connect with that, literally going to Sunday school right now.
Right.
So one of the quotes I have here is, nice does not equal to not racist.
Right.
It's simple. It's not like this intellectual, it's not like it's as straightforward as it can be. When you hear something like that, like, what do you think?
Part of me is like, it's such an explosive and powerful statement, but it's so ridiculously obvious that why does it take someone to just say that for it to resonate? I think so many people recognize it and understand that, but just to have it there.
Right. No, I think people don't want to think about the internal biases that they have. They think I'm doing good in the world. I'm doing community service. I donate to these causes. There's no way that I can have any kind of personal biases that can come off as racist or, any kind of ism, really. Right. Sexism, anything. Right. But we all have to be thinking about how can we be better, because it's not about what you think, it's about the other people that you're affecting by those words. And so it is important to sometimes kind of just step back and think, like, what is the effect I'm having when I'm saying these things or doing these things, or why? What is the motive? How did I get here? If you will.
That's what I say. That's one of my favorite things, and I wish I had more time to spend on what she does. But she'll take the comments, Rachel Cargill, and she'll highlight, and then she gives you like a little. It's almost like an English lesson, but it's not English. But she just breaks it down as to why this statement is. Why are you telling me to watch my tone? You're not the tone police, and things like that. And these comments that she gets, and I love them. And at the same time, I'm so ashamed and upset that I need them. As an educated woman, I mean, I have a lot of degrees and I've been to school for 20 years, just like, you have a ton of degrees, but the fact that I still need someone to break it down or I might miss it is, really, I don't know what the word is, but just makes me kind of realize
disappointing for yourself.
I just have to do better. And I love that she basically, breaks it down for us so I can be better about that stuff.
Right.
So.
I mean, she does not hold anything back. So the next one's a little more, it may hit more chords, okay? So I have this one. Anti-racism work is not a self-improvement space for white people. If protecting bodies and empowering Black lives aren't the center of your work, then you're not here for Black people. You're simply going through the motions to make your white self feel better. And I think, I was like, wow, she does not hold back. But sometimes you have to say it as it is. Because I personally feel like some people want to make themselves feel better in this space. I don't feel that way when we have conversations, but I have other people who it's like half foot in, half foot out. They'll come and they'll say something to make themselves look good, like they can sympathize or empathize, and then the next day they're making excuses for the things that are going on. I'm like, what's happening here? Are you really just looking for a pat in the back from your Black friend? Like,
I think for me, it's been, I read that, and I've read that a few different times. And I'm sure it's her posting it and some of the other people I've been following who repost it. I think for me, it made me realize that I've sort of been just doing the bare minimum for Hunter when I thought I was being pretty good. We have actually, Frank and I talk all the time about where we live, where we send the boys to school. You and I have talked about this, having Black professionals in their space, because it really hit me, even though I knew it, again, I sort of knew it peripherally. It didn't really sink in when you would tell me how you would go visit schools and they had never seen a Black attorney or a Black female attorney.
Never.
And
they don't.
it's mind-boggling. But I also grew up in DC, where everybody's an attorney. You can't turn around without tripping over 4 of them. But like it's those just differences in growing up down here versus, Hunter has a Black pediatrician. His school, we fought to get him in this school. It's one of the best in Delray, but it's 30% Black, 30% Hispanic, 30% white. I don't ever want him to be the only Black kid in the classroom.
Yeah.
We put in a lot of the local Delray things. And I realized that all of that is great for him and our family, but I'm not doing anything to make the world better. I'm making his little place easier, but I'm not actually doing the work to
help in like the cultural shift or advocating for policy change. And well, maybe like right now is this the time, right? You're seeing there's so many people, there's a movement now. So I feel like sometimes it's hard to really process that stuff, right? And think, and we have busy lives. It's hard to be the head of a household, take care of your kids, be a good wife. That's hard. So like, don't count yourself out in that regard. So it takes that extra step to say, I need to do more. And I think it's amazing that you already are doing the work of, I need to make sure that my children are surrounded by people that look like them, that they can identify with their culture. If there are things that I'm not able to do at home, etc. That's really important. But I think now is kind of the perfect time because people are trying to do the work and there's kind of momentum, if you will. If you had to, choose one area that you think you'd want to see policy change in, just one thing that you connect with the most, what do you think?
I think I'm really connecting with the defund the police.
Okay.
When I first
and you use that word, and when you say defund the police, what do you mean? Because we all know there's tons of controversy.
Because I hated that word, because even though I knew everybody was going to take it to mean abolish the police, those are not the same words.
Right,
and
that's not what it means.
When I first heard it, I was like, okay, that can't be what they mean, because that's not really practical. So let me do some research. So I started digging. And then I was like, well, I need to find places where this has actually worked. And so I found some articles where they talked about it. And then when I really understood it, Frank and I have had these conversations. I'm like, police should be doing police work. There are criminals out there. There are people who are doing dangerous, violent crimes, and police should be there. But why are they the ones who are called when somebody falls asleep at a Wendy's?
Right.
Why are they the ones who are called when there's an autistic man in the middle of Miami and his caregiver is laying? To me, it is beyond the pale, because they don't have the training. And then the other thing that I've thought about, which I've always sort of laughed about with Florida, and I probably shouldn't laugh because I'm learning that it's really true everywhere, is the ridiculously tiny amount of training.
They need more training. They need more. I think you need more education before you can be a police officer, and you need more training.
Right. We're lawyers. It took us a minimum of 3 years before we can practice. And then we take this giant exam that is not easy to pass.
No.
And police get what, 20-something weeks?
21 weeks.
I mean, how is that not the first? And then CBS Sunday Morning, it was actually this morning, was saying that there are actually more police in this country by like 100, I don't know what the number was, than there are of every single type of social worker.
Really?
Combined.
And that's something. Police officers should be trained in social work.
Or they should.
Or like given some, they need to have the empathy. They need to be able to connect with the community. So more community policing, rethinking what that means, more de-escalation. But I just really think they don't see us Black people as people or in the same way. They don't connect with us, whereas they'll see their white counterparts and like they can empathize because that's their family member, right? It's just the culture as to the way in which they see Black people as thugs, as criminals, automatically fearing us. That just needs to shift,
Right.
But there are a lot of things that need to be done.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily think the police do need more training, but I also think we need to have more non-police who are in that role. Like, what is it?
Yeah, you don't have to be called for examples that you gave. Like, it doesn't always have to be the police that is called.
Right.
I think that's important, and they do have different. I know locally there's 211. I think that's a national thing too. where you can call just for community services generally. Maybe implementing more things like that to help people on just a regular basis. It shouldn't, the first thing you shouldn't think, oh, let me call the police for every little issue.
Or it even could be the police, but they have task force. They have mental health task force where you're sending out paramedics and social workers instead of police. You know, our neighbor, their son was actually killed by the police in front of our house about 2 years ago. And he was a drug addict. And the reason he was killed is because, you know, somebody thought he had a gun, but he didn't have one. And if there were mental health people there, then he wouldn't have lost their kid, right? And I'm not saying he was a good guy. I don't know. All I know is that Frank was one of the few neighbors that was nice to this poor kid. And he's not a kid. He was probably my age, but for some reason in my head, he was a kid. But I just...
Because people make mistakes. And sometimes it takes a while to get them back on track.
Right. Well, that's exactly right. Richard, I'm blanking on his name.
Brooks?
Yes, Brooks. That video that they put up of him talking about how he is not going to give up and he is working hard. Like, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
Isn't that what we're all doing? We're every day trying to be better people. And, you know, I think the hardest thing that has hit me about this, and it should have hit me whenever Trump started campaigning and he had his Make America Great thing, and I did question it. It was actually in one of the Emmanuel Acho things. It was the one with Matthew McConaughey. At the end of it, Matthew McConaughey did the Langston Hughes poem, and I wish I had written down what Emmanuel Acho said, but he said, yeah, we're really waiting for America to be as great as it could be. We're not there yet. And he said it so eloquently. And that's sort of become like a...
Yeah. We're waiting for America to fulfill their potential, fulfill that promise of equality for all.
I love that there's still hope among Black people because I wouldn't have it. For me, it was a defining moment of this country is not what I have pretended it has been for my entire life. And I think that's been sort of the crack in my facade, my persona, that's really allowed this to become a defining moment for me too, was finally being able to admit to myself that this country sucks for a giant part of the population. And just because it was good for white men for its entire history, you know, I even said to Frank, I said, I don't want to do July 4th anymore. Like, again, I've sort of known about Juneteenth Day, never really dug into it, and that should be the day we celebrate freedom because that's when whatever free, even though we weren't voting yet, you know, things like that. But those are the types of things that I have allowed myself not to think about,
not to question.
Yes, and I'm so disappointed in myself for that. So it's been eye-opening for me.
Well, I mean, I think generally, like I mentioned before, it's so hard to be taking on that stuff every single day, to feel, you know, to fighting the fight every single day. We should be taking steps and to grow and check ourselves, but it gets exhausting. You know, it's tiring. I can't even. I'm not a social justice warrior in that I'm not doing that type of work on a daily basis, but I try to keep myself immersed. And in a time like this, it's emotion. It's heavy.
Yeah.
You know, I haven't been sleeping right. I can't get my mind to focus on like real life things. So I think that's a part of it. Our natural instincts is to put things in a little bottle and say, okay, I'll deal with it at another time. But I do think we have to do better, because if we are exercising our minds and our energy and being the activists that we need to be on a regular basis, it won't be as tiring because it will become normal, if that makes sense. It's like anything else, you know, when you train your muscles and your body and your mind, you become used to it. It doesn't feel as exhausting. But also you need to know how to activate self-care when needed. So I'm working on that too.
And I think too, hopefully, and we have these big defining moments, and we have this time right now, and I often wonder if the pandemic is the reason people have been able to pay so much attention to it this time, because A lot of people aren't working. A lot of people are home. A lot of people don't have to go or can't go to work.
I honestly think that's why this moment is different.
Right.
We as Black people have been seeing it and saying it, and people say, okay, yeah, Black Lives Matter, but all lives matter. What are you guys complaining about? I think for the first time, everybody had to see it. They saw Ahmaud Arbery murdered in the street, then Breonna Taylor, then George Floyd. And we had that incident in Central Park with the white woman weaponizing her skin against this Black man, saying she's going to call the police, knowing that the consequence is that he'll likely be hurt or murdered. He could lose his life based on for one phone call. And then not seeing any response. It took them forever to arrest the folks who murdered Ahmaud Arbery. Like things like that. And people are paying attention, and it's in the news cycle. They're, wait a minute, is this stuff that's going on a regular? And then back to back to back. And everybody's at home and they have to see it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why it's different.
Well, I'm hoping too that because it's gotten so much immediate short-term momentum, that the daily expenditure of emotion and hard work and toil will become an easier load to bear, because there will be more people sharing the burden with you all, and being more vocal and being more out loud about the fact that, I would walk with you anywhere. I would carry you if you needed it. You are that dear to me. And I have to do better, because I don't want the day that my son no longer looks like a sweet little 6-year-old to be a day in this world. And I have always prided myself on trying to be a good friend, and I think I need to do a better job at being an ally. I don't know what that means for me yet, and I'm trying to figure it out. I think I need to be more educated before I can really do the work, but I think that hopefully the burden will be shared more because of this. So that's what I'm hoping.
Well, do it. I think it's awesome that you are, ready to take that on. And I'd say don't have any kind of limits. Don't feel like I'm not educated enough, so I can't do it. Right? Educate yourself. It's almost like flying the plane when it's not done, but just start. Start, because we need the support and we appreciate it. And there will be more uncomfortable conversations. You will have hiccups as you're doing it, and that's probably why you're like, I feel like I need to be educated more so I don't step on toes. Don't let your pride get in the way. If you step on a toe, just apologize and move forward. Don't let that be something that stops you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's good. I'm, all the stuff I've been reading on anti-racism, I think it was really clarifying for me. I think I've been a very good, well, I shouldn't even say that. I've been an okay non-racist for most of my life, where I have actually tried and been cognizant of it and tried not to be. I'm sure I have been. I can think of instances now that still make me red with shame. But the idea of anti-racism as a radical, as action as opposed to inaction, as radical movement, I think has been really eye-opening for me. And I have to figure out a way to do that in a way that's safe right now from the pandemic because of my kids. And
right. We can't pretend that it's not happening. It's happening.
Right. But I think it's the first time in my life where I am, upset that I can't be out there protesting. There have been other times where I'm like, oh, I should go out and protest. But now I really want to be there. So I think the idea of that sort of radical, I just need to find where it is that I fit and find where it is that I can be of use and be helpful. So I'm still working on that and I'm still trying it. But for me, I'm a little bit of a bookworm. So education helps me feel a little bit more sturdy.
Well, you know what? I think this conversation is a start, and I just want to thank you for agreeing to talk to me and share your experience and listen to mine. And I think that's what it's all about. Everyone has their role in this movement, and these conversations are equally as important as those who are out there protesting. So.
Yeah, anytime.
All right.